Well, Steeler fans, you can wipe the sweat off your brow as the Pittsburgh Steelers end up hanging on for what was a really impressive victory that ends up being just a win, which a win is good enough these days in the National Football League. But we're going to talk about, how we really feel about this victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh getting a 20-24 win over the Tennessee Titans. The Steelers remain undefeated as that record continues, as impressive as that's been so far to open up this 2020 season. The Steelers now moving to 6-0 to open up their year, again with a victory 27-24 over the formerly unbeaten Tennessee Titans, who now fall to 5-1 with their comeback effort falling short. I'm Mike Asti, and this is the Steelers edition here of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, SteelersNow.com. I'm going to be joined for this broadcast with Daniel Valente, who is a football editor with The Score, and you also may know him from a former popular blog around the Steelers Circle. So, Daniel, I appreciate the time for sure, and as I was talking to you off air, I didn't travel down there, so I was covering this from home, and I kind of thought with the way things opened up, I had the script, I had the show ready, everything was fine, did some work around the house, and get back in there and realize, no, everything has totally changed. Tennessee makes it a game, or maybe the Steelers allow them to make it a game, and it ends up being a very close game. The Steelers hang on to win nonetheless, but I'm sure the way this game ended provides different feelings for Steeler fans than certainly the way the first half ended. So as we start things, just your overall takeaway right now, this team is undefeated. That is the most important thing. They did hang on to win. This is the best team they faced all year, certainly. But this was made more of a game than maybe it should have been with the way things started off for the Steelers.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks for having me on. Absolutely. And, I think it's, like you're saying, it's 1-0 this week. They beat the Titans, an undefeated Titans team, and that's all that matters. If we recall back to years back, this might have been a game that the Steelers end up dropping. But the fact they were able to hang on, I think that speaks volumes to the team that even if they do slip up, because, they were a tale of two halves here where they came out strong in the first and then kind of took the foot off the gas, made some mistakes in the second, but they were able to find a way to win. And that, I think, is one of the biggest characteristics of a good team. And I think you could say the same even for the Titans. Like, they were down, like you're saying, even here at the office, we have all the games up and the Steelers are up big and I'm sipping my coffee, thinking this is going to be a cruise, and the Titans find a way back to make it a game. And those are just two characteristics of like good teams, that they always find a way to claw back into it. But seeing that the Steelers are able to close it out, that's definitely an encouraging sign.
And it's hard to be too upset, and I'm sure Mike Tom was going to tell us this all week during these Zooms. It is a win. The standard is the standard. We managed to get a victory over a really, really quality team, a good team, a team that made a run in the playoffs just a season ago and actually has added to that roster. Ryan Tannehill struggled early in the game, but managed to kind of find his footing toward the end. Same thing with Derrick Henry. So again, I'm sure Mike Tomlin's going to give us that coach speak, kind of also what you're saying, which is true, that these are good players. That's a good team. We weren't figuring to dominate them and win by 17, so we managed to get the win, and that's the most important thing. However, do you feel like the Tennessee comeback, not taking away from them because they were unbeaten prior to this game and they were a playoff team last year, the Steelers were not, but do you feel like this game became close because of more what Tennessee did, or because the Steelers allowed them to get back in there? Ben, the 3 interceptions, a little bit more careless with the football than in past weeks where he was kind of more managing the game and throwing up the big play when needed. This game maybe reverting back to a little bit of the old Ben of a couple years ago. Deontay Johnson, maybe his involvement allowed Ben to think he could do that, but Connor got let off the hook for some gaps early in the first half. They were able to kind of make up for those errors, but then did not make up for them when Tennessee got going again. But was it more what Tennessee did or maybe what the Steelers didn't do as well that allowed this to get closer?
I think, to be honest with you, it's a bit of both. So Ben obviously had some throws that I think he would definitely want back. There's that interception at the end of the first half where, potentially you take a chance to kick a field goal and you throw that away. The second one was tipped, so that one I'm not going to throw on him. The third one there was another tight window throw, and I think it goes even if we're going to extend further than Ben, the defense on that long AJ Brown touchdown, like that's just stuff you don't see happen, right? Like the Steelers are a team where if you're going to score on them, you're going to earn that touchdown. They're going to make you scratch and claw your way down the field. So to see something like that, that's uncharacteristic as well. But, credit to the Titans too. They did a great job of getting back in the game. They started pounding Henry more. So I think it's a bit of both there.
Yeah, and Ben failing to get 300 yards passing, but throwing a decent amount of passes there in a close game, 3 interceptions, the quarterback rating below 100 for the first time this year. So not as efficient as he's been to this point. However, again, fairly, it was the best team they played all year, based on certainly what they've done this year in the Tennessee Titans and also what they did last year coming into this season. Mike Asti, Daniel Valente of The Score here on the Steelers postgame show on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, SteelersNow.com. We do have some chat activity here. I think I'm getting excited here. It seems like a lot of positivity actually in the chat, despite the final score. Kind of surprising, but I guess we'll pivot that way because a lot of people are very excited with the 6-0 start, thinking Super Bowl. This is a legit contender. This is the best team in the AFC. This is a legit Super Bowl contender, maybe the best team in the NFL. I know I actually tweeted this, and I was thinking that based on what the Ravens did in comparison to the Steelers against, say, Philadelphia and some common opponents, the Chiefs are certainly right up there, but the Steelers had an argument after that first half as maybe even the best team in football. The way this game closes, I don't know if that argument is going to be as strong, but they are 6-0. They're certainly a contender. They certainly feel like they can go all the way. They certainly have tons of talent. And with the exception of Johnson, they are relatively healthy now, with the key cogs at least. So with this win, even though Tennessee came back a little bit at the end, where does this bring you in terms of your thought process for the Steelers overall in the landscape of the NFL? Where are they amongst the NFL elite as a legit contender?
I think they're right up there. I think you got to put them top 5, especially you look at this team and they're just full of depth and full of talent at all the positions. And it's not so much like in past years where it's very superstar driven. It's, every week it's a different guy getting the ball and they're feeding a different guy. So for the past couple of weeks, it was Chase Claypool. Today we saw JuJu step up. We saw Deontay step up. And I think health is another one. As long as this team stays healthy, I do believe that they can go toe to toe with the NFL's best. And a lot of that comes down to the defense as well. This defense could, stand their ground against any NFL offense.
Yeah, and I think that Deontay Johnson's health is a big deal for how far this team can go as well, because obviously JuJu has been a great receiver in the years past, despite all the pressure on him coming into this year and a bit of an off year last year. Obviously, Chase Claypool is having a record-setting type of season so far for a rookie, but Deontay Johnson being there and playing as well as he did prior to his injury today makes them have a 3-headed monster. A lot of teams have 2 great receivers, but to have 3, somebody's going to be open. Somebody's going to have an opportunity if they're all out in the field at the same time. So his health certainly could be a big deal moving forward. Why did you not put them a little higher, though? It seems like our chat activity, a lot of the fan conversation you see on social, top 5 almost appears like a given to most fans, and a lot of fans have them top 3, if not more, because it does appear the feeling, besides maybe the Seahawks, that the best teams are in the AFC, at least elite-wise. But why did you not go stronger in comparison to a lot of Steeler fans out there?
Well, I think next week is going to be the telling point of this. I think you definitely got Seahawks, Kansas City up there, 1 and 2. And, I think honestly, if the Steelers come out next week, they beat Baltimore, there's really no other reason why they shouldn't be in that top 3. So I think next week is going to be a major telling point. Right. But I mean, this game moves them into the top 5 for sure. I don't think that can be argued.
Yeah, and you have to, when you're 6-0 in the National Football League, especially in a bizarre asinine year like 2020 has been for everybody, you got to be certainly up there at minimum in any type of power rankings, or if they're going to call it football style rankings. I certainly think they would be in that top 5 conversation, if not more, just for being 6-0. And now having beat a quality opponent, we no longer are going to have to see the Steelers haven't played anybody for these wins, those joke tweets and some serious, can't be there this week. It's now a 5-1 Tennessee team. They came back. They show what they're worth, and the Steelers were still able to get the win here.
Here's the thing about, the quality of opponents. The Steelers don't decide who they play and when they play them. Their only job is to take care of business. If they take care of business, everyone should be happy. And they beat the Titans today, undefeated. The Browns last week came in, they had momentum. Could this be the year that they finally...
That was a 4-2 Browns team coming in, too.
Knock off Pittsburgh at Heinz Field, and they got blown out by 31. You had the distractions with all the COVID delays and stuff, and this team has, stayed on the ball, come out, and won quality football games.
Right. And again, that's what Mike Tomlin's going to say. That is true. It's not like that can be disputed. Anyone can get a win any given Sunday. It's really the age-old adage that's boring to say, but it's really, really true, especially this year with dealing with COVID, with dealing with these teams having such reduced and weird off seasons, and new players or young players having to get immersed and learn playbooks. It can be very, very difficult, which is why maybe you see Eric Ebron still kind of not totally fitting in, even though they're trying to involve him. A new player on a new team, it's going to be really, really rough in a year like this without a traditional training camp. Daniel Valente, the football editor, with the score here. Mike Asti, Steelers now, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Steelers get a victory, remain undefeated, 27-24. They hang on and get the win over Tennessee, who now falls to 5-1. Daniel, when you look at this game and kind of the way it unfolded, obviously there was a little bit more carelessness from Ben. Obviously the offense was moving in the first half and not as much in the second half. What did you see from the defense maybe that is still a strength? Obviously that pass rush in the first half was there. Tannehill kind of able to figure it out a little bit more in the second half. And maybe what could be still a weakness for that defense, because again, this defense did face the best team it faced all year. I don't know if it faced the best offense it faced all year, but certainly that's a conversation with Derrick Henry being there and some injuries to, say, Philadelphia and some others they had faced to this point. But they did allow Tennessee to come back in this game, and not everything's perfect. So what can still be adjusted? And right now, what do you like from the Steelers defensively?
Well, one positive that I'm really taking from this game, and I think we've seen it week by week, is that they put a dominant effort out for like 50 minutes. They have a few hiccups here and there, but here's what reassures me, is that the Steelers have always been a team that gets better down the stretch. And they're still having a few hiccups, but we're still talking about them being one of the best, if not the best defense in the NFL.
Right.
So for me, it's all correctable stuff that, could easily be cleaned up as we make a run down November into December. And I think as long as health permitting, they'll be right up there and continue to be the best defense in the NFL.
And they're at least a defense that it's not always the case with tons of stars. That doesn't always mean that it's going to translate. But generally speaking, when you have a defense with tons of stars that are all individually great, looking at the history of the NFL with the 2002 Buccaneers, the 2000 Ravens, etc., usually that defense ends up helping your team go on a pretty solid run. And obviously last year that couldn't happen because Ben wasn't there and all the injuries in the offense was so sluggish. But with the offense playing as well as it's been this year, being so versatile, and the talent on that defense, it usually means good things for the overall team. And again, they stand at 6-0. So there's not too much to complain about, for sure.
One more thing I want to add about the defense too is I think they're just able to get it done in a variety of ways. So one big key for teams that are going to be making a playoff run is, can they get pressure with four? The Steelers can get pressure with four, no doubt. TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Tuitt, Hayward. And then not only can they do that, if they want to get creative, they can mix it up. They got some of the best stunt packages probably in the NFL, and they can get after the quarterback in so many different ways. You can bring Mike Hilton off the slot. I know he didn't play today, but it's just I think that's what sets him up for success down the road.
Yeah, and a lot of chat activity too about TJ Watt and what he meant to this defense today and what he's meant to this defense all year. I know I saw you throw up the tweet. Everyone else has been really tweeting it most of the year. It really seems like destiny for him to get a Defensive Player of the Year. If not this year, he certainly is a contender this year at some point. It would be shocking if in 10 years he doesn't have at least one. Whether he gets to his brother with 3 is immaterial. He's certainly destined for one based on the way he's been playing and that pass rush. Anything you see that the Titans may have done differently or what changed in the second half? That pass rush was just making it one of those days for Tannehill. and he's coming off 300-yard performance, that he's been better than people think, but the Steelers seem to be his kryptonite defensively, and a lot of quarterbacks like him have these problems against the Steelers-like defense, but they were then able to move the ball, and it wasn't as much of an issue in the second half. Some people here in the chat are concerned about the Steelers, in their eyes, lack of making halftime adjustments to try to change course. It seemed like the same old game plan from the first half, which almost resulted in a loss in this game because Tennessee clearly adjusted.
Well, here's the thing, too. The Steelers aren't the only team, making adjustments at halftime or needing to make adjustments. Like, the Titans are obviously going in there saying, what do we got to do to change things up?
Right.
And it's just a chess game. Now, I'd probably have to go back and rewatch to, give you like a full detailed answer.
Here.
But from what I was seeing, I believe, probably just more Derrick Henry was finding more success. It looked like it opened up more play action over the middle. I know A.J. Brown took a couple over the middle there, and then he had that one long run. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's so much the Steelers didn't make adjustments, but just the Titans are a great team. They went to the AFC Championship last year for a reason. They made quality adjustments as well, and sometimes that just happens, but the Steelers hung on, and they scraped out a win.
Yeah, Daniel Valente, football editor with The Score here, Mike Asti on the Steelers post-game show here for Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live. The Steelers 6-0, still undefeated as we're going towards Halloween. I mean, that is not something that happens for the Steelers, regardless of the success over our lifetime. That's just not something that happens going back again, 1979 for the 4-0 start, and then even further for this situation. But nonetheless, they get a win over a quality team. Anything you saw differently from JuJu in this game? I mean, he was helping others in prior games. I think a lot of the criticism was too much on him prior. However, his numbers weren't there. He wasn't giving you the numbers that are going to quiet his critics prior to today. But today, he does step up. He seemed like he also was more involved in the offense. I don't know if it was intentional, but it did appear like there was a little bit more of an urgency from Ben in the offense to get him some catches rather than just doing the dirty work. Anything you see differently in the Steelers offense and game plan with JuJu today in comparison?
Yeah, perhaps maybe they saw something in the game plan that said, like, this is going to be JuJu's week, but I think some of that is just a result of, Claypool's been red hot the past few weeks, so teams are zeroing in on that. Right. Deontay came out and had a monster first half and was looking like he was playing together a quality start before he left. So I think JuJu just has more of those opportunities.
JuJu and Deontay, both 9 catches on
that. And I think it just goes back to trust. Ben has a lot of trust in JuJu, so when it comes down to make those tough throws, like we saw even on that interception there in the end zone, it was to JuJu. And I think that just speaks, even though it was intercepted, it speaks to the trust that Ben has in JuJu Smith-Schuster.
What were your thoughts, because we see some question on this, on the Steelers kind of throwing one up there that led to a Ben interception towards the end of the first half? Did you like that call? There was aggressiveness there up by 17, but as we see how this game unraveled, that could have been a risk that could have turned things around negatively.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it right when it happened either. I think if it's there, take your chance. But I mean, that throw was quite easily picked. I'd be, go out, kick the field goal, add 3 points. You don't want to leave any points on the board potentially, especially for a team that is also 5-0, like the Titans were coming into this game.
Yeah, and as the game unfolded, those 3 points could have meant the difference with how this game eventually ended up. The Steelers winning 27-24, the Titans having the ball late in the game. The Steelers certainly making their mistakes, and the Titans able to capitalize on some turnovers late as that game got a lot closer in the second half from the Steelers' domination of a 17-point lead in the first half here. As Steelers remain undefeated, though. Anyone else in the chat, feel free to chat along as we kind of round things out. What are your thoughts on Tennessee? Any different thoughts on Tennessee from this game? They also were facing a quality team for maybe the first time all year. This was the best team they've faced to this point. They didn't win, but they came back and they made this close. They took advantage of some Steelers mistakes. They are built similarly to the Steelers, maybe not as many stars and as many weapons of household names, but certainly Derrick Henry, they were able to eventually get it done. Tannehill played better as the game went on. In terms of them as a legit contender, they're now 5-1. They're certainly in a winnable division, but it appears the thinking still around them, and it's still even hard for me to kind of come around, is they're a team that's really, really good, but they don't scream as much maybe as a Super Bowl contender as, say, the Steelers, because there are still players, JV and Clowney and a few others, they have not really been able to involve. And they have there's just something about them maybe that still gives some people pause. Any different thoughts on Tennessee from this performance to what you previously saw from them this year when they were undefeated and winning games?
I wouldn't say my opinion changed too much. I think even coming into this game, I had them as not a quote unquote Super Bowl team, but on a team that was right on the edge of that bubble. And I think a lot of that is, they got a good run game. Their defense hasn't been as good as last year. They've struggled this year, especially on third down. But I think Mike Vrabel is a hell of a coach, to be honest with you.
What gives you pause, though? Because it's almost hard to say this for a 5-1 team. I was trying to think of what I can give as a rationale. For me, too, I'm with you. Why are they on that bubble for everybody? Why are they ranked 7-8 when the record should actually argue that they're a top 4 or 5 team like the Steelers coming into the game?
I don't know if it has to do with like quarterback play too, but Tannehill's been killing it. So I don't know what that is too, but it's almost like there's like a stigma around them.
Yeah, it might be, honestly. It might just be a false narrative that we're being caught up in, because it does feel like that Tennessee narrative of, and this even goes back to Jeff Fisher teams, that they can be really good. They can be a contender. They do it occasionally, and now they finally got there again. But it's hard to be scared. Like it doesn't, it seems almost like you'd rather face Tennessee in the playoffs than Baltimore, Kansas City, then Pittsburgh. And that's the elite teams in the AFC right now.
And that's what I think they are. They're that team that sneaks up on you. Like, I'm sure how many teams last year were probably like, oh, we got Tennessee, and then they go out, they beat New England, they beat Baltimore. So I think they're always going to be that team that gives you a fight. And, a couple balls go their way and they could pull out a win. And I give that to Vrabel. I think he's a really smart coach, a really good coach. Just the small things like last week against Houston. I don't know if you saw, he had that intentional kind of 12-man on the field penalty. Right. And it's just like he always knows.
He's learned that from Belichick. Yeah, that's a Belichick thing. Yeah.
But he's done that before too, and it's just like this guy always knows how to give his team the slightest edge possible to win. And I think that's another quality sign of a good coach.
It does appear that he is a good coach. Mike Tomlin, sung his praises, and I don't know how much they really know each other personally, but just from his pedigree and learning from Belichick, and he's coming back from as a player with the Steelers and the Patriots. So he has a great lineage of coaches that he was around to lead him into the success and give him the strategy to eventually do it. That has not always translated. And the Belichick coaching tree has not been that incredible, with the exception of, say, Nick Saban in college. However, Mike Vrabel is certainly getting it done, and you could certainly argue getting the best out of his players that are there. That run last year was certainly not what anyone would have expected, and a lot of these players, Ryan Tannehill included, were worse, much worse, in their prior destination than what's happening now. So that's definitely a testament. It has to be to the head coach, regardless of what was prior going on with him in terms of COVID protocol, but they seem to turn the corner there. I actually saw in the press box, and this is not the case in Heinz Field, that they had plexiglass in between and right next to each individual media member. I will tell you, at Heinz Field, we are all separated. It's not like anyone's next to you. They have everyone separated and socially distant. But there's no plexiglass. Like, I'm not locked in a jail in plexiglass. That's the case now down there in Tennessee. I don't know, and I'd love to know if that was a new thing because of the issue they were involved in, or that was going on all year long. But that's just interesting because I have not experienced that in other NFL stadiums, certainly not experienced that firsthand at Heinz Field. Daniel Valente, a football editor with The Score here. Mike Asti, Steelers now, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Steelers get the win. Now 27-24 and now 6-0 on the season. Daniel, as we kind of play it forward here, Baltimore, you alluded to this, a big game. If anyone wants to argue with either one of us of where the Steelers rank in terms of top 5 in the league, well, fortunately for them, unlike, say, in college football sometimes, they can just prove it on the field. It's going to be really decided in that game against Baltimore. Dallas, thought to be a big game coming into the year. Not really as much, certainly without Dak, and really not even maybe without Andy Dalton, who got rocked and ended up leaving the game. Ben DiNucci, for a alert for Pitt fans, got in there and played, and Ezekiel Elliott's still there, but that team has just really been a mess there with tons of drama. Cincinnati and then Jacksonville, the next 4, and the Bengals and Jags obviously could lead to victories, you'd figure, for the Steelers. But going into that Baltimore game, What are your thoughts for kind of a quick preview of that game? Baltimore is one of the best teams. They certainly have been playing like it, but they haven't been as great as last year. They have certainly showed signs of being able to be exposed. Lamar struggled in the first few games of this season before eventually turning it on. How do you think that's game going to shake out, and what kind of are any keys you may have for that Steelers-Ravens game? Because by far that's the toughest game here of this next quarter based on the situation with injuries and really the teams they're facing.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be another one of those AFC North heavyweight fights, where it's just the two heavyweights, probably not just in the division, but up there with KC and the whole conference coming head to head. And, just to quote like Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to
love this.
Okay. So, there's a chance for the Steelers to go out there, and for any doubters who still remain, if they can beat Baltimore, there's no argument to be made. Now, the thing is, Baltimore coming off a bye, so they've had a nice week off. The Steelers are coming off now a very intense and highly physical game against the Titans.
Yeah, it was going to be a bye, but it ended up not being. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they rebound after that. And even if we want to go further, like down the stretch here, I think what will be very interesting to see is if the Steelers do end up dropping a game somewhere along that line, how do they respond? What is their adversity to defeat going to be this year? But I mean, hopefully we don't have to worry about that, and they just keep it rolling. And we're talking.
I mean, I don't know if 16-0 is going to happen. They're going to lose a game here. I would certainly figure that. I will say the difference about the Steelers team, we also talked about that at the top of the show, from years past, is that Denver game with the way the Broncos came back, even the Eagles game, and I was there at Heinz with all the injuries Philadelphia's dealing with. Carson Wentz kind of turned it on at the end. They came back. Tennessee coming back here in this game. That is a quality opponent. Obviously, that's a concern. The Steelers are dominating in the first half of games, which is not normally like they've been in recent years under Tomlin. And in the second half, they're letting these teams come back. Whether they're good, bad, or ugly, these teams are coming back and making these games. That's eventually going to catch up to them. Somebody eventually is going to kick a field goal, get a turnover. Something will happen, and somebody eventually will beat them, you would assume. And that's the reason why there's concern. Obviously, if you do that to Baltimore, if you do that to some of these teams later on down the schedule, that could be more of an issue with somebody eventually coming back. But to your point, in years past, they would have laid one of those eggs. Yeah. And they managed to get through and get these wins. And, destiny might not be a real thing, or maybe it is, but it almost feels like that vibe is getting around the Steelers a little bit, that this is going to be a special year because they are getting wins when they're almost trying to screw them up at the end, and somehow the ball's still bouncing their way, which certainly in years past, one of those games would have been a loss today, probably would have been a loss. But this team now 6-0. Again, it's hard to complain too much. I'm sure Steelers fans will find a way. I'm sure us in Talk Radio Land, we're going to find a way to pick at things. Certainly, they did not play perfect football at all. There are things to worry about, but they are 6-0. It is 2020. It is of all years. It is the NFL. So that's certainly a big deal here. And that Ravens game is going to go a long way. I'll kind of get you out of here this way, I guess. If the Steelers beat Baltimore, what happened? What did they do well to get the win? And if they lose to the Ravens, then what do you think occurred to have that game unravel and be a victory for Baltimore?
Well, I think same keys for Baltimore, kind of like what the game plan would have been coming into this game, where it's you're going to have to limit, number one, Baltimore's, they got Yannick Ngakoue from Minnesota, Calais Campbell, Matthew Judon. So you're going to have to limit those pass rushers. The Steelers' offensive line is going to be in for another test. Make the game one-dimensional again, force Lamar to pass. I think I saw something like over the last 4 weeks or so, his completion percentage is like 31st in the league. So
it's been different this year, completion percentage-wise. He's getting into that kind of – that was what happened to Cam Newton after the MVP year. He started sliding in completion percentage, and we've seen a decline with injuries. That's kind of happening to Lamar too, it looks like.
So don't let the Ravens hang around. Put your foot on the gas. Force Lamar to beat you with his arm. If he wants to beat you with his arm, kudos to them. But if you're going to let them hang around where they can, keep you honest, where he can take off with his legs, you got Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, it could be a struggle. And I think that's where, if they do lose, that's what it'll come down to. Turnovers, just not executing, no more gimmies like on the A.J. Brown touchdown today. But I think if they keep that locked down, we're they're hopefully coming out of here 7-0 next week.
Yeah, and again, just how astonishing that would be. I mean, you look at the schedule, I didn't appear to be murderer's row coming into the season with some of these teams they were facing, but just in the NFL, just 7-0 is 7-0, and it just you never can expect that. Certainly that's not been the case for the Steelers, even in great seasons of recent memory, really in generations, and yet they're doing it this year here. And that Ravens game is really going to be the test by far. I mean, this was a great Tennessee team, obviously the best team they've faced to this point, but that Ravens game is even going to be a bigger deal because that is a divisional game. And many people think the Steelers, despite the last couple of years not being fully loaded in a way, could win this division. They're going to need to beat the Ravens in order to do it. As you said, to beat the man, to be the man, you got to beat the man. So that's very, very true. In order to be the man of the AFC North and beyond, the Steelers are going to have to beat the man, the current defending man of the defending AFC North champion, Baltimore Ravens, and that will be the Steelers' next game. Daniel, I absolutely appreciate the time for sure. Again, Daniel Valente, football editor with The Score. Anything you want to plug or tell anybody where they can find you, or really any final thoughts?
Yeah, so if you want to find some of my work now, you could just either download the Score app, and if you go to the NFL news section, mine and my team's articles and stuff like that, analysis will all be in the river feed of that app, or you can go on the website, thescore.com. Other than that, I just want to say thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was a blast, actually. And I had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll look to you again. We got a long season here, and I'm figuring even a longer one the last couple of years with playoffs. I'm assuming happening, regardless, unless there's some historic slide that occurs. And those shows will be pretty lit if that ends up occurring here. But see here in the chat, a lot of positivity here in this chat, which I'm not used to. Glad for Pittsburgh. My hubby is going to be elated when he hears the news. Crystal, I don't know how your hubby's not aware yet, but get him to watch some games here. Glad he's a Steeler fan though. But yeah, for him. But yeah, Daniel, absolutely appreciate the time, man. So I'm going to let you go here, and I appreciate it. Maybe we'll talk again, because obviously this is going to be a long season for the Steelers as Pittsburgh moves to 6-0 on the year, a 27-24 win over the Tennessee Titans, who now fall to 5-1. They got the win. That's the most important thing. Certainly some things that can still be improved upon. Certainly the Steelers weren't perfect. They have a propensity to let these teams come back. That's absolutely going to be talked about all week long. The naysayers are going to bring that up, and it's a fair criticism. I'm going to bring it up. If they want to be a championship team, they need to correct that. Ben needs to not be as careless as he was in this game. And Deontay Johnson's a big deal. We saw that in this game. They need him to be healthy. Obviously, they can't force him to be healthy, but that's going to be a big deal in terms of if this team can really win a championship moving forward. But nonetheless, they're undefeated here as we go towards Halloween. So it's not a scary season this year for the Steelers like it's been in recent years with drama and tons of losses in games that maybe they should not have lost. So for Daniel Valente of The Score, for all of us throughout the Now Network, of course, Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live, I'm Mike Asti, and that's it for another Steelers Sunday, another victory Steelers Sunday here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, SteelersNow.com.